Hello, and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode. I am so seriously excited for this conversation. I've been excited about it for weeks. I have Tiffany from Cosleepy on the podcast, and we are going to be talking all about tips and tricks around bed sharing and co-sleeping and how to enjoy it more and make it work better for your family. So, Tiffany, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself for those people in the audience who are not familiar, with your account and your work.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Tiffany. I live in Northern California, but I work with families all over the world. I'm kind of calling myself a safe co-sleeping educator just because there's like no term for this, really.
There isn't.
I had my first baby in 2018. And so by 2020, I had created a blog about just sort of like really detailed niche things about how to bed share in real life because we have some general safety guidelines that we could find. Sometimes it's really hard to find them at 3 a.m. on Google, but if you're lucky enough to find them, you'll get some basic stuff about how to bed share safer. But what about like if your mattress is too plush and you don't have enough money to buy another one? Like, modern day parents have all these little nitty gritty questions that I couldn't find the answers to. So in 2020, I started a blog. And after that, I created an Instagram account to lead people to the blog. And it's sort of gone from there. And that's where I met you. And so I spend a lot of time creating guides, which are kind of like, online courses, except I try to keep them very simple and straightforward because I remember being that new parent at 3 a.m. and not having the capacity to go through an online course. So I just try to break down. I focus on safety, comfort, and logistics. Those are my three things. And I try to just make that as clear as possible for new parents who are bed sharing either because they want to and they love it so much, or maybe they feel kind of forced into it. Like this is the only way that our family is getting sleep. And so they're not happy about it. And that's okay. You know what I mean? You don't have to be happy about it, I don't think.
Absolutely, right? Like I feel like very few people with their first kiddo come in happy and excited knowing that bed sharing is their plan if they are from a North American background.
Yes.
Not that never happens. It definitely can happen, but I feel like, generally when families come into bed sharing with their first kiddo, they come from a culture where bed sharing is normal. And that's not our culture. And so it's like that you find it out of necessity and love it, or you find it out of necessity and resentfully use it because it works and it keeps your sanity. I don't know. I feel like everything in parenting, like nursing, bed sharing, whatever, we don't have to love every moment of it for it to still be worthwhile or a useful tool or, something that's helpful.
Yes, I love how you called it a tool. That's what it is, basically, just to help you get through this season of life a little bit easier. And it might be 2 or 3 months, or it might be 2 or 3 years. It just depends on your, the dynamic, your child's temperament, your family. And so there's not one family, like every family looks different at night, as you know.
Absolutely. I mean, I get asked this sometimes from families that are bed sharing kind of begrudgingly. They're like, okay, but how soon is it realistic to get baby out of the bed? And I'm like, well, I can't tell you that, because it does depend on so many factors. But then you get the well, my sister-in-law's brother's best friend's child is still bed sharing at insert any random age, and we don't want to be like that. And I'm like, well, okay.
But I mean, like, are they
There's
getting more
options.
sleep? Yeah. Well, yes, is that family getting more sleep? Do their children feel more secure at night? Like not afraid, not have anxiety or afraid of the dark or all these things, which I'm not saying is caused by, crib sleep or whatever, separate sleep. But there's so many different factors here when it's not like so black and white. Like
Exactly.
we're bed sharing with my 3.5-year-old
Mhm.
100% of the time. And then my 5.5-year-old starts in his own bed, but around midnight or whenever he wakes up for that first time, he'll come on in and join us. And we love it. We all get the best sleep that way. Like if
Yeah.
I had to be like, if I was thinking, oh, he's 5.5, I can't believe this. And every night at midnight, I got up, took him back into his room and kind of like laid with him for a little bit or helped him go back to sleep. By the time I got back to my bed, so much time would have passed. And why would I do that to myself? Like this works so well. And some people know we bed share. Other people in our lives, like friends, they don't know and it's not their business. So it's not like a secret that I'm, ashamed of or anything. It's just nobody really needs to know. It doesn't need to become a quote thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I say that a lot. I'm like, first, is it a problem for the family or are you projecting your kind of perception of it on them? And two, did they try? Like, if it is a problem for the family and they're always moaning about it, were they able to connect with the right support to make that transition, right? Like, let's not take on other people's problems. Let's worry about your baby and your toddler, what's happening, and like kind of walk your own journey. Because, yeah, like many cultures around the world, people bed share for years with their kiddos, and
Yeah, a lot
that's
of
the
them.
norm, you know?
Yeah, and many of those countries, it's typically like until puberty. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
long time.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot longer than 5.5.
Yeah, and you
So,
might go bed sharing with your parents to bed sharing with your siblings or
mhm.
grandparents, you
Yeah,
know,
grandparents. Yeah,
and then shifting into maybe not bed sharing, but all being in the same room as a bunch of your siblings to moving in with a partner, like a, long term, like you, sleeping alone is not
totally.
necessary or biologically necessarily biologically
Exactly.
normative, just
Hmm.
because it's kind of the obsession of our culture.
Yeah. And it's like easy for us to talk about this now and like kind of take a step back and look at the world's population and think of human history. But do you remember in the very beginning when you have like a 1 month old, like it's really hard to take that step back. You're in the middle
Yeah,
of it. You have your pediatrician saying something, maybe your mother-in-law or your own mother
yeah,
saying something. And it can become this really big, shameful thing. Like a lot of people tell me uh, on Instagram, because I have a big community there, many, many people have said they feel guilt for bed sharing. And that's not
yeah.
something I ever felt. So I always say, what are you guilty for? I don't quite understand it. But I guess and tell me if you felt this way, but they feel like they're being a bad mom. They're either putting their baby in danger or they're not as good as their friend over here who's a mom because they can't quite figure out how to make crib sleeping work or something like that. Did you experience that?
I have seen lots of my clients feel that way. I didn't feel that way. When my oldest was born, I was a project officer on a Healthy Start grant, so infant mortality reduction and birth outcomes. And one of our metrics was the percentage of families that were bed sharing. But like the higher it was, the more it was like, not good, right? And so we lived, ate, and breathed AAP guidelines. And so I have a cultural anthropology background. I mean, I grew up with my mom telling me that I bed shared with them like till I was like 3. And that was like normal, right? Normalized. And so for me, it was more like I was working in infant mortality world and then ended up bed sharing with my oldest. And that was just like, whew, kind of like a minefield to walk through.
Yeah.
I never felt guilty about it though. I just was more kind of dialed into the safety. Like, that's great, mom, but that was the 80s, and okay, that's great that in Japan they bed share all the time, but they also don't have beds like ours. And so
Yeah, that's
it
true.
wasn't it wasn't that deep innate fear that it like all bed sharing is unsafe that a lot of parents have, but it was that like, I mean, Western beds aren't particularly the safest option, but that's the
Mm-mm.
environment I'm in and I'm not following the guidelines. And is that bad? Like that kind of was more my wrestling with kind of space.
Yes, got it.
So yeah. I mean, I think that anxiety is such a big piece, right? The guilt, the anxiety, the worry, and then the other people's opinions. I think that
Yeah.
so many parents, I mean, I guess so many parents who are even just not sleep training or being in more of a responsive approach struggle with that, but so much around bed sharing and like, am I doing the right thing? Am I hurting my baby's independence? Am I ever getting them out of my bed? Like, so many fears and so much
So
anxiety
many
there.
fears, so many fears. It just like makes me sad sometimes to get the questions. I'm just like, I'm so sorry. And it's like, not, it's just a product of living in the United States usually. Like we have people from
Mhm.
all over the world, but I'm usually hearing this from people from like Canada and the United States. Sometimes in the UK, although they've made a lot of progress with the Lullaby Trust. We need to follow their lead.
I
But
use that as an
I don't know if
example
that'll
all
happen.
the time. Like when I'm teaching, I'm like, well, in the UK, their guidelines have been shifting. Like they've been doing such awesome stuff.
Yeah, they're acknowledging that people will bed share. And it's not just like 10%. No, it's like up to 80% admit it. So it might even be more. So they're saying this is going to happen. And yes, it's not ideal, but if you're going to do it, here's some things to make it safer. But here,
Mhm.
nope, it's just a blanket statement. Just nope, do not bed share. Room share for sure. Like keep your baby in your room, but do not let them sleep on the same sleep surface.
Yeah.
And that's it. So no wonder so many accidents happen, especially, and as you know, I'm sure most of the, quote, bed sharing or co-sleeping fatalities are like on an armchair or a recliner. It's not
Yes.
on a parent's mattress.
Yeah. And we have
So
such a skewed view of risk in this country because of the way the conversation happens. I know a lot of the parents that I support who don't want a bed share because I work with a ton of bed sharing families, but not exclusively. And a lot of the ones that have a baby that needs contact and don't want a bed share end up sitting up and sleeping with their baby. And I'm like, oh, that's so much riskier, but it doesn't feel riskier to them, because we don't focus a lot on the risks of falling asleep sitting up with your baby in the glider. So
yeah,
bed sharing
I
feels so much more dangerous when it's like, actually, that's not more dangerous. That's safer, so much safer.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with one of my best friends who just had a baby about this because they said their baby had RSV and they've been sleeping with the baby on their chest on the recliner. And I sent them a few chapters from my guide. I have a guide on how to safer chest sleeping. I sent it to him and I said, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't usually do this with friends, but I do know enough about this area to feel concerned. So please, that's great that you're doing that while she's sick, but please do it in the middle of your mattress, not on your recliner. And we
Mhm.
kind of got into a little, I don't know, it kind of got tense because they said, no, I will not fall asleep on the recliner. I know I can stay awake. But you can't, after day 9 or 10 of this, like at some point you will break, you will fall asleep if you've been so
Yeah.
sleep deprived. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
but of course, it's up to every single parent to make their own decision and to assess the risks and everything. So at some point, I just said, okay, of course, it's up to you. I don't want to lose a friend over this. And I sort of just did all I could do,
Yeah.
basically.
It's hard to be a sleep professional in whatever terminology or capacity you are, and have friends and neighbors still having small children and wanting them to have information, but also wanting to respect that space. Like so many of my neighbors don't know what I do. And when I first started this podcast, my husband sent out the episode and he was like, look, look, look. And I was like, I mean, I'm glad you're celebrating that because I'm not good at doing it for myself, but also I like purposely kind of keep a low profile for what I do around like my like neighbor friends, right? We're not super close, but we socialize regularly. And I'm like, I don't really want to get into sleep with them because,
Yeah, it's such a hot topic. You
you
could lose
know,
a friend or an acquaintance over this. Like some
yeah,
people are so passionate that we are teaching people to do something that's dangerous, and they won't even have a conversation with you about it. It's just
yeah,
too upsetting to them that we're
yeah,
doing this work.
yeah.
So
And I think it's just important as a parent, just acknowledging moving through that space, right? With the worries and the stress and having that good evidence-based kind of info like that you put out. And, I have a couple blogs on bed sharing and
you have a
it
really
is,
good podcast episode
yes,
on it.
yes, a safety episode that was in my first like lineup when I first brainstormed like 10 or 12 or whatever episodes. I was like, that should get in there because it is such a big piece of my work that I work
Mhm.
with a lot of bed sharing families. So the information, but also I think just acknowledging that like our culture shapes those anxieties and that there is so
Yeah,
much pressure and judgment and that we can't always fix that, like we
right.
can't change other people's judgment and opinions. We just kind of have to move through it.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and if this isn't something you openly talk about, feel free to just say no. But
Okay.
were you honest with your pediatrician about bed sharing when your kiddos were like
Um,
babies?
no, we were in a weird situation because we moved to a different state when my first baby was 6 months old. So over the course of that, like going to the new hospital and trying to find a good fit, like we probably saw four different pediatricians. And I don't think I told any of them that we bed shared. In the beginning, it would have been because I was trying to put him in the bassinet and I was like
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have even admitted to myself that we were going to be bed sharing parents. But
Yeah.
eventually, I was not in the right mental space. Like I wasn't strong enough to have an argument with a pediatrician or even a nurse
Yeah.
about this. And when we discuss this on Instagram too, there's like, it seems like two camps of people. There's the kind that are like, no, I don't care. I'm going to tell them the truth of what we do so that they'll have the correct statistics. They'll know so many
Mm-hmm.
families bed share and look, they've got a healthy, happy baby. Nothing's wrong. I totally, James McKenna talks about that in his book, and that would be the goal, obviously. But
Yeah.
again, I remember being in that state. Breastfeeding was really hard in the beginning. That was a struggle. Wasn't getting sleep. He wouldn't sleep on the bassinet. He would only sleep on my chest. He wouldn't even sleep next to me. He had to be on me. So I'm trying to deal with
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. And so, yes, going in and having an authority figure lecture me, I did anything I could to avoid it. So I personally don't judge parents if they're going to lie or be vague. And I know in general it's not good to lie, but it's kind of like a survival thing, like in the
Yeah.
beginning. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, with my oldest, like we weren't bed sharing in the early days when our pediatrician would have asked. And honestly, the pediatrician we had for his first 2 years, I adore her. Like, I still occasionally get local clients who have her, and I'm like, I'm so jealous because she's with Kaiser, and we only had Kaiser for the first 2 years with my husband's job. And she's amazing. And I really wish that I had been honest with her because I don't think she would have told me off just based on other conversations and going against guidelines and how respectful she was of like me as a parent and parents in general, but also that I had a maternal and child public health background, that my mom is a pediatric nurse. So we got a lot of leeway with her on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it just never came up because you know, we weren't officially bed sharing, right?
Yeah.
Until about 4 months. And she wasn't asking us questions about sleep setups at that point. And then with my daughter, our pediatrician, who I liked a lot, but didn't know how she'd be about like tiny baby stuff because we didn't start seeing her till my son was, almost 3. And she was on maternity leave. So we got whatever nurse practitioners. And I was like, I'm not going to see you long term. And I'm not getting into it. So I'm like, she has a sidecar co-sleeper, which she did have. She just
Right.
never slept in it. Um,
Exactly. Yes.
so, I was just like, I should be the person showing up as a new mom and advocating, but I didn't have it in me.
Exactly.
But one of my way back, like when I was first getting into La Leche League, one of the leaders, she was a public health professor. And let me tell you, she waltzed into her pediatrician's office like, I'm bed sharing. And they're like, lecture, lecture, lecture. And she's like, I have my PhD in public health, right? Like, basically, I know better than you how to read research.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
you can take
amazing.
your lecture and shove it, was her attitude. And I have always admired that about parents who could do that.
I know because it's rare. Most of us feel intimidated. What's it called? It's like a white coat. There's some like term in psychology where people there are authority figures to us for whatever reason. We don't even know consciously that it's happening. And so, like me telling my friend, please don't do this. Please trust me. I've done a lot of research. Do it this way versus the pediatrician saying something to them. Like, who are they going to trust
Mm-hmm.
more? Probably
Yeah.
the pediatrician.
Yeah. That cultural authority.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big piece. And for me, it was just like, I don't want to get into it. Right. Like, it's not, I'm pretty skeptical of doctors anyway. I mean, like, I'm not like anti Western medicine, but like, my mom's a nurse. I am fairly above average health literate. I have a background in public health. And I'm like, you're a doctor. I know what you're not trained in and what you're trained in and where your limits are. But also, like, man, I just did not have the energy for that conversation when,
No.
like, I mean, the point was advocating for future parents, but I'm like, I'm like, I have very little time. And
No, but like,
I don't have the mental
right.
space.
Yes. And what you just said, doctors, at least from what I've been able to determine here in the United States, don't study infant sleep
Nope.
or anything in medical school. They don't study
Nope.
it. So a lot of their advice is because they're looking at a very tired parent. And so it's kind of like anecdotal, like whatever they personally think will help. Is that what you've read too, or what you?
Yeah, I'm generally telling most of my clients that doctors, pediatricians, unfortunately, are not your experts on sleep or lactation. And they either get 0 to like a couple hours
Yeah.
of outdated training in medical school. You don't learn about it in residency. And so, unless you have a pediatrician who feels very passionately about educating themselves in an open minded way, and outside of just like AAP, continuing ed type stuff, then you're not going to get good information. And so take it with like a whole handful of salt and go find solid evidence-based, research.
Yeah. See, this is something that I enjoy talking with parents, if we're doing like a one-on-one consultation or something, but it's hard on Instagram because there's so much nuance here. I don't want to make a post that makes people who are just scrolling by quickly think I am anti-doctor, or we shouldn't trust people, doctors or anybody in the medical profession, because that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm just like you, it's about using common sense and looking at your own family's specific situation and dynamic to make these decisions, not to just walk into your 2-month appointment. Your doctor says, nope, your baby really should be sleeping this many hours in their crib. You know what I mean? Oh, they're not eating enough, supplement with formula. And that's like all they say to you. And you just sort of like spiral when you go home. And no, that's not ideal.
Yeah. I mean,
that's not.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I would say there's a reason why lactation visits are usually like 60 minutes to 2 hours, right? Because like feeding information is super nuanced. So is sleep if you're really getting into it. But yeah, I mean, we just can't expect pediatricians to know deep about everything. That's just, they know a lot and they are awesome and they play an important role, but they're a generalist, not a specialist. And I think that's important to remember.
Well said.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to shift gears a bit because I want to talk about some tips and tricks for making bed sharing just seem more doable and more comfortable and enjoying it and getting just into some of the like, you're not going to find it in your guidelines kind of info. Things like how do we make the cuddle curl more comfortable, or how do we troubleshoot the bed? I love to talk a little bit about some of the gray areas and things.
There's so much gray.
I know we could literally have an entire a million part series on this, but let's just start with like, okay, I know when I am talking to a family about cuddle curl, which is your kind of, I mean, you explain it. You have a whole guide on it. You explain the cuddle curl for those who don't know the terminology.
Yes. So the cuddle curl, it's also called the C position because your body kind of curves into a C. And so this is when you're lying on your bed beside your baby. They're really close to you and their head is at the level, your chest level, sort of like homed in on your breast if you're a breastfeeding parent. But as you so eloquently said in your episode that I just listened to on safe bed sharing, you said that even if they're not 100% breastfeeding, you want that to be like their source of where they kind of go to and associate feeding with. You said it better than me, but because when they're homed in on your breast, you don't have to worry as much about them like rolling over that way once they're mobile or looking for their bottle somewhere. And when they're right next to your breast like that, with their head level with your chest, they're so much safer because your lower arm. So imagine I'm so sorry, this is hard to describe on a podcast, but when you're lying on your side, your lower arm that's like touching the mattress is kind of above your head and protecting your baby from your head pillow. And I know a lot of parents don't use pillows, but that's not a good long-term plan. That's going to really hurt your body. And you absolutely should use pillows to support your body as you bed share, but you just have to keep them behind your body or down lower. Like if you choose to use one between your legs, let's say. So out of your baby's sleep area, which is kind of inside your little curl, hard to describe, but your baby will have like a little pocket there where they're safe from suffocation risks like pillows and blankets.
Yeah, they're like between your tricep, your the arms on the mattress and your knees kind of tucked up.
Yes.
That little like
Mhm.
C. Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the pillow piece because I think so many parents do feel like they need to strip the bed completely. And it's like, oh my God, I could not have bed shared with my kiddos for years without a pillow at my head, a pillow at my back, and a pillow between my knees. And then I
Yep.
was like, oh, I'm all supported and like, don't have to
Yes.
totally stabilize my body on its own.
Yeah, you can also, if your partner's in your bed with you, you could sleep back to back so that they're,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? You need something behind your back to help hold you up in place, or while you're sleeping, you're going to keep kind of leaning backwards just with gravity.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of stress to put on your body all night long if you're fighting it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you need something firm. If you're sleeping, if you've pushed the bed into the corner of the room or against a wall and you're sleeping by the wall, you could put a pillow right there and then you have the wall to keep you up. I used to
Yeah.
do that a lot. It's just when you flip sides so that you're breastfeeding with the other breast the next time, you just have to make sure that your baby doesn't sleep up against the wall because that's dangerous for them.
Yeah. I will have personally myself and will also for families that don't want to like move the bed like that, you get the really nice mesh bed rails that
Mhm.
like go under the mattress, and hook on the other side so you
Yes.
tighten it. That's a good prop for a pillow. The
Okay.
mesh
We
bed
have
rail,
a,
pillow right next against it, and then your back. And that's another way to kind
I
of
love
create
that.
some stability for the pillow.
I love that.
Um,
And mesh bed rails are also a great area. I recommend
yes.
them wholeheartedly. And we've used one from the beginning almost,
Yep.
but you just have to know that there are a few risks with them. So, do you want me to say what they are?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. It's kind of like a side note thing. But once your baby is mobile, you want to make sure that they aren't able to climb up and over it and fall down and hit the ground because that's happened. And as I mentioned with the wall, ideally, you wouldn't want your baby right up against it. It is mesh, which is great because if their face is against it, air will still be able to flow through. But that's the beauty of the cuddle curl. They're going to be right next to you where you can kind of keep an eye on them and have quick, easy access. If they're over there across the bed near the mesh bed rail, like you can't, it's harder to see them. You know what I mean? If their face gets wedged, sort of. Sometimes there's like a little gap between the bed rail and the mattress. So it's there as like for me, I think of bed rails as like a peace of mind thing that can help you feel a little bit better that your baby's not going to roll off the bed. But again, you don't want your baby too close to it.
Yeah.
So
I lean the same way with you on the gray area. Like I personally use them. I'm definitely get the ones that you can really control the snugness, right? Like I know there's some that I like the ones that you can hook to the other side of the bed. I know there are some that you
yeah.
can just kind of shove under, and I'm like, no, because that could actually create a gap, right?
Mhm.
Because they can shift. But I think with caution, they can be
I
a
agree.
good tool as long as you know that they are kind of a gray area, and technically their recommendation is over 12 months. But so much about bed sharing is gray areas and the realities of it, isn't it? I mean, like
Yeah.
guidelines are wonderful, but they're a starting point, and you make so many decisions, not just with bed sharing, but like in parenting, so many decisions that it's like it looked really obvious on the guidelines, and then the reality of it is more nuanced and has lots of gray
Hmm.
area.
Yeah. Like the mattress thing is really tricky for people. I did a
Yes.
lot of research on mattresses, like more than I ever thought I would in my entire life. I know a lot about them, which is so weird, but I now do not ever recommend memory foam.
Yeah,
Um,
me neither.
yeah, but so many, at least here in America, so many mattresses are memory foam where they have like a layer on the top that's memory foam with the sole
Hmm.
purpose of being more comfortable and cushy. And the way memory foam works is it heats up with your underneath your body heat, and that is what makes it able to, the foam to move under you and
Mm,
support stuff. That's not good if you have a little baby sleeping there. You need a really flat, firm surface that is not going to give in any way. You know what I mean?
hmm.
So
Yeah.
memory foam is not ideal, but unfortunately, so many families already have a bed like that or can't afford, a brand new one. So that's really tricky. I often, if someone asks me what to do, I'll recommend buying a firm latex, not memory foam, topper that you can put on your mattress. But again, this gray
Yeah.
area it's not just going to work on any mattress. What if your current mattress is old and saggy? It has indentations where your bodies have been for years. Then a mattress topper isn't really going to help. It'll also sink down in those spots. So you
Yeah.
need to already have a mattress that's relatively firm for a topper to actually work. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's tricky.
Yeah. It
So,
is. I know I'll have some families, and I've never priced it out, but I've had some families who will like get like a futon style, like Japanese futon style mattress and like just make
Mhm.
a big floor bed and be like, the heck with my mattress. I don't want to go there. We have
Yeah,
the space for that, right? And of course that is investing in something, but not,
it's not as expensive.
yeah, not as
Yeah.
expensive as a new mattress. I
Yeah.
mean, like I feel like that's such a big concern, right? Baby falling off the bed once they're mobile, the mattress being too soft, like my body aching. Like those are some of the big concerns
Yeah.
that I hear. But you also talk to lots more people, at least via Instagram. What else do you hear that's kind of on parents' minds when it comes to like, how do I troubleshoot making this doable?
Well, the cuddle curl, that's one of the reasons why I made my guide on it because people hate it. They don't want to do it or they're begging me like, I'm my baby's 6 months old. Can I stop now? Like, so I've tried to figure out ways to make it more comfortable and work well logistically. Like, because when you do switch sides, you might have to wake up your partner, like tap them so they go over there, or you know what I mean? And so some people don't want to do that. Other people aren't their partner sleeping in a separate room, and so they would need a bed rail or they would need something for that other side.
Mm-hmm.
So what I try to do is convince people to sleep in the cuddle curl at least for 6 months because that is when there's a big drop off with the risks of SIDS. After 6 months, it's much more rare for a baby to die of SIDS. So please try to get at least there so that you can protect them from that. But also the cuddle curl is protecting them from suffocation and entrapment and the other issues. But ideally, as far as Dr. James McKenna says, if you can sleep in it through their first year, when we know there's literally zero chance of SIDS happening, that would be ideal. So that's
Yeah.
hard. A whole year, that could be hard on your body. But that's why you need to be proactive and get some pillows, invest in some new pillows if need be, like a smaller one to go between your knees, for example. That'll really help with hip pain and
Yeah.
lower back pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
I feel like that older baby, younger baby division is tricky because like there are risks that are like we should be aware of across the first year, but the risk in the first 6 months versus a risk in the second 6 months is just not it's not comparable. Like it's
Yes,
so
exactly.
significantly elevated in the first 4 months that it's tough, right? It's tough, and particularly in a very thoughtfully set up bed sharing setup. I don't always have the answers for parents on that, but I do like to acknowledge that we are dealing with different things in the first part of the year and the second part of the year. And I personally wonder if we had a society that embraced bed sharing, if we would see more nuanced guidelines. Like, I don't know. Like,
I
that's
know we're
something I think
lucky.
about.
Oh, I think about that too because I only have so many sources when I'm trying to help families. I have Safe Infant Sleep by Dr. James McKenna, and I have Sweet
Mm-hmm.
Sleep, La Leche League's
Yep.
book, and a few other random sources.
Some
Some
Helen Ball stuff. Yeah.
Helen Ball like studies,
Yep.
but it's not necessarily like practical guidelines. And so
Yep.
I interviewed Dr. Helen Ball for my guides and asked her some questions. But a lot of the things that she said, it was based on her own experience. She's had a lot of experience, which I, valued her advice. But again, it's not based on studies like
Yeah.
case
I know.
control studies.
I
So
saw her speak last, and I was going to tell you this before we started recording. I saw her speak last year at a conference, and I like grilled her about like what happens if like a 9-month-old baby on a very firm, safe bed sharing setup wants to roll over on their tummy. Like, what should the parent do? Because I get that question
yeah,
all the time, all the time, and her answer was very lovely and also very researcher, which was like, older babies are very capable. They do what they want to do. So if you can get them on their back, that's great. But I'm like, she's right. Like there isn't a clear evidence base for like how much should we be concerned about that, right? And
that's yeah.
and I'm like, can you just give me an answer? And I'm like, of course you can't just give me an
No,
answer.
she does.
Like
Yeah, she
it
doesn't.
was
When I've talked to
so
her, but
graceful, so great, it's so like so well kind of handled. But
I
you
know.
know,
I love her. But you're right. When I ask her questions, that's it too. And so I personally have decided that, especially on Instagram, I'd rather be much more conservative in my advice
yeah,
for liability reasons. And like, I could never forgive myself if a baby got hurt or something happened to a baby based on my advice. So I say, sleep. For me personally, I found that it was much easier to keep my baby on his back or side if I was sleeping in the cuddle curl position. Once I
mm-hmm.
slept on my back, and I couldn't keep him in that little pocket, he would flip to his tummy immediately almost. And
Yeah.
something people say to me constantly, because for me, this is one of the issues where I get yelled at on social media. This is it, because people are angry that I'm telling them that anytime they wake up and notice that their baby's on their tummy, they should roll them backwards onto their back. They get mad at me because they say their baby is going to wake up and it's going to ruin everything. Their baby's finally sleeping. Just let me leave him there. He looks so happy and peaceful. So, but no, I say for the first year, while SIDS is a possibility, and we know that it's like diminishing like risk as we get closer to 12 months, but while there's that risk, we know that tummy sleeping is one of the biggest risk factors or causes or correlations. Sorry, I always say causes or correlations. I use them interchangeably, but they're different. But tummy sleeping is one of the biggest reasons that SIDS happens. At least that's based on the research we have from the 80s when they did the whole back to sleep campaign, and SIDS death that dramatically dropped since the 80s, right? So I say no for the entire first year. If they're beside you on an adult mattress, which is not a firm surface, even the firmest mattress you could find on the market, it's not as firm as a crib mattress. So I say flip them over. And so people don't like me for that, but that's what I'm going to say.
I talk people through it as clients, right? Like, here's the guidelines and all that. It's both sides of it suck, to be really honest, right? Like, it's hard because that is absolutely the safest thing to do. It's absolutely the guidelines. And having been supporting so many tired bed sharing families of the year, I can understand why they get frustrated with that advice, right? Like, especially if there's a kiddo where it's not just like a preference, like that baby will not sleep in a crib, like will not sleep in a crib, as opposed to a baby that you're like, we're bed sharing, but like we could get them back in the crib and let them tummy sleep.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Sometimes I've recommended chest sleeping if there's a child who insists on being prone. Dr. Helmball had said that it's much safer, from what we know, for a baby to sleep on a human body, like on a parent's body, than on a mattress.
Yeah.
A baby prone, like on their tummy on a mattress, is not a normal position for a baby. And so that's when trouble starts. Bad things happen. So if you feel comfortable with it, but it's also a gray area, you could sort of prop yourself up so there's a low angle right there. You're reclining in the middle of your mattress and have your baby lie on your chest where their head is sort of like over your heart.
Yeah.
If this is for the ones who insist on being prone. That's what I recommend.
Yeah. I think the age matters so much too. Like, if a baby starts rolling at 11 and a half months, right? This is really different than a 5-month-old baby. But I think it's the gray areas can be so tough, you know. It can be so tough.
Yes.
But drawing us back from messy safety situations, I know for me, as sort of round out our like making bed sharing more comfortable, things for me, a big piece of that was also being mindful that I was sleeping in one position for a lot of the night and to stretch, right? Like to take care of your body outside. But now I'm a runner and I ran when both like my kids were babies. So like I had to stretch anyway because my oldest was little. I was training for a marathon. Training for several.
Wow.
And when my daughter was a baby, I was desperately trying to convince my pelvic floor to appropriately function so I could get back to running. And so like that was a regular part of my routine, but I don't think it necessarily is for everyone. I'm thinking about like stretching your hips and stretching your back and stretching your, your shoulders and your chest just so you're not compounding, the maybe hunching a little bit with nursing, not being as well supported, and then the bed sharing and then the carrying, like they all kind of
there's a lot of hunching. If you think about when you're carrying or breastfeeding, that's sort of the same position as when you're in that cuddle curl and you're kind of like this. So yes, I always recommend stretching, but I do understand why people say like, I don't have it in me in the morning to sit down on the floor and do 10 minutes of stretching. Like, I understand it can be another thing to add to your list, and you just can't mentally get there. But if there's some way, if you did yoga beforehand and you can do the child's pose, I forgot what it was called, but that's the most basic, simple one. If you're on the floor with your baby, is there on a mat or something playing, and you can just get into that position, that will really help. That's a very basic one.
It's comfy.
But yeah, I hope people can do that. But I do understand both sides. But even if this week you feel like you don't have anything in you to wake up and do some stretches, but next week for some reason you do, like go for it. Like you, as you know, we're always changing. One week is terrible. The next week it's just like, whoa, what happened? Everything is completely different. And that the first year, it just things changed so much,
Yes.
week to week. So I definitely agree with the things you've suggested so far. Pillow support, stretching if you can in the morning, but also I always recommend switching sides every time you're going to nurse, especially if you're nursing in the side lying position, which most people do, but not all of them. But again, this might take some logistical prep with your partner if they have to move or wake up or something. But I think it's worth it. If you try to sleep on your right side all night long, it's really going to hurt,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's a good tip. I like personally would spend the majority of the night on one side because I like sleeping on one side better than the other. Like that's just a personal
yeah.
thing. I like sleeping on my right side better than I like sleeping on my left side. And so even now, like I spend most of the night on my right side as
Mm-hmm.
compared to my left side, but more on my tummy than I would when bed sharing. And so
So,
definitely do the, you know, nurse from the lower breast and then kind of lean
yes.
over to nurse from the top breast to get both sides
I
with less switching.
but when were you able to do that? Because that's not you can't always do that right from birth, right? It's later on you're
It
able to.
depends. I have found that it depends a lot on your own anatomy, right? Like your own breast size and shape. It depends on the mattress you're sleeping on. The softer the mattress is, the harder it is, which obviously we don't want to be on soft mattresses, but the softer, the harder it is. But also how well is your baby latching? Like how much are they doing versus how much do you have to support them?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people can't do like leaning over and kind of doing the top breast versus the bottom breast until baby's got a little bit more control and doing a little bit more themselves. I feel like it was different between my two kiddos, right? But also so many things were different between my two
Yeah.
kiddos. We bed shared with my daughter from day one, and I already knew how to to nurse, right? Like I knew how to position my body and a baby to sideline nurse in a way that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. But I also had huge oversupplies in the beginning, so there was no way I was going to lean over with my top breast in the
Yeah.
first month or so without like, drowning my baby,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was
Yeah.
that was what would have happened.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. See, my problem with that is I didn't feel comfortable falling asleep when I was nursing from the top breast. So
yep.
I'd rather move, get everything set up where I felt like it was safe, latch the baby on, and then I could fall to sleep, back to
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah.
I didn't have to stay up and then make sure, wait for them to unlatch.
Yeah.
Because at least in my experience, my baby usually unlatched on their own and rolled backwards. Sometimes they'd want to sleep on their side. And when they
Mm-hmm.
got older, it's another gray area. When they got
Mm-hmm.
older, I felt comfortable leaving them on their side. But I also knew all the other little details. Like we had a very firm mattress. So when they were on their side, they weren't like in an indentation. You know what
Yep.
I mean? It was pretty flat. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's just
All
like
the
so
gray
many,
areas.
yeah, there's so many things you need to assess, unfortunately. But once you get it figured out, like once we went through 2 or 3 mattresses until we invested in one that cost more, unfortunately, but it was much firmer. And so once we went through those pains of like setting everything up to where we felt like it was as safe as possible, then I just could sleep without any anxiety. And it was just so much more enjoyable and fun and has obviously led me to doing this work. Like if I didn't like bed sharing, I would not be doing this.
Yeah. And I think just listening to like what you found worked best for you versus what worked best for me shows like there isn't one right way. Like there are safety guidelines and there are things you have to assess and consider, but different people are going to feel differently about some of the gray area stuff.
Yeah.
And different people are going to find that like small tweaks to positioning, right? Like had I switched sides throughout the night, my hips and back, probably my shoulder probably would have felt better in the morning. But like with my daughter, we had my older kiddo in the bed too. So I was keeping them away from each other.
Yeah.
And so like whereas I just naturally sleep on one side better than the other, I also was in another gray area of sibling bed sharing. And So the baby was staying on the baby side and my older kiddo was staying on his side. And that's, was that. So I just think it's just like with anything in sleep, right? There are options, and what works best for you and helps you feel safest may look subtly different than, another family's.
Yes.
All within these same lovely guidelines and kind of navigating these gray areas, bed sharing.
Yeah, I love how you said that. Like when it comes to gray areas, like every family is going to make a different decision, or like not everyone agrees on that. I would hope that most of us could agree on the basic black and white guidelines, like let's say sober parent bed sharing only. I hope everyone could agree on that. But as far as like, yeah, is it okay to bed share with a toddler and a newborn as long as one of the parents is in between? Some people will probably say no across the board. Others, like you and I, said, yeah, we feel we have assessed all the various little tiny details and we feel safe with this setup.
And I knew that my older kiddo wasn't going to crawl into the baby space. That's one of the things that I talk about with families. Like, you got to be pretty sure, you got to be confident that your older child understands they need to stay on their side and isn't going to crawl over into baby zone.
Yeah, my oldest was only 2 when I had my second baby, and we thought he'd be fine behind me, but he wasn't. He kept trying to crawl over. And so we eventually had to separate, and he and my husband slept in one room and I was with the baby in a different room. And that was really, really hard on all of us, but especially my toddler.
Yeah.
Because it was something we hadn't planned for. We had planned leading up to the baby being born, talking about how we're all going to be in the bed together. And then suddenly we had to change that. So that was really hard.
Oh, I bet, especially at 2, like when they understand some, but they don't understand enough, It's tough.
Yeah, that was by far the hardest thing we've ever gone through.
Yeah, I try to have parents kind of come with a plan A and a plan B when they're still bed sharing through pregnancy with another child. But I think we can't always prepare for everything. Like, we can prepare, but sometimes even our plan A and plan B don't totally cover it. So we have to just do our best, right? And navigate it.
Yeah.
All right. Seriously, we could talk forever and ever and ever, but to kind of round it up, what would you say, maybe aside from safety, what would you say is kind of like the number one advice you're feel like you say a lot, or encouragement maybe to bed sharing families? Do you feel like you have like a couple of things that you like are often coming back to?
It's just, I said it earlier, but you don't have to like bed sharing. Like, I think if you separate it, you don't think of it as like a lifestyle thing, and it doesn't become your identity, and you just say it's a tool. It's much easier to kind of like get into that zone and do it when you're not planning on doing it, and you have your beautiful bassinet there and you really planned on doing separate sleep, and so you're just sort of trying to figure out how you're going to go on. It's much easier, and you can just go for a month or 2, or assess how your baby's doing or what's causing, like, as especially through the first year, there's just so many changes, and there's various times when your baby might crave physical contact more or closeness more. And so I recommend that people go with the flow. And I'm very type A person, and it was hard for me at first. But once I did just say, like, sort of surrender and just say, like, I don't know what I'm doing. That's okay. And there's no one here who's going to hold my hand and walk me through bed sharing, because unfortunately here in the United States, nope, that's just not done. So I need to just almost on a nightly basis, just assess how my baby's doing. Do I need to go to bed with him at 6 o'clock because he's doing a lot of cluster feedings, and I know that he's going to want it? There's no point in trying to like leave him with my husband or go have a shower, eat dinner. I'm just going to have to eat dinner in bed. Like, before I had a baby, that would have been mortifying. I just would have been like, there's no way I'm going to eat dinner in bed with my baby connected to me at 6 p.m. But once I accepted it for just a short period of time, it just made it so much easier to get through those nights. And I wasn't doing that for the whole first year. It was just for a little while. And then I was able to, we came up with this, like, a system where my husband would hold him and let him sleep on his chest while I did whatever I wanted to do, dinner, whatever. Or if I wanted to there were many nights when I just wanted to lie down in bed and just sort of like relax. Because in my life leading up to this beforehand, like, I never had nights like that. You know what I mean? So I was sort of like, wow, it's nice to actually, for the first time in my life, be able to lie down at 6 p.m. and just watch whatever I want to watch on TV or Netflix. I have this beautiful baby here who's changed my life, and I'm just soaking up all these things. He's changing every day and growing, and I'm never going to get this time back with him. Like it just completely changed my life. And so it was just a lot easier once I just accepted it and just went with the flow and sort of did what I thought my baby would be easiest for my baby on that particular night and would maximize sleep for all of us. So whether that was him sleeping on my chest or next to me in bed or, whatever it was like that. So that's advice I give to people often is I know it's really, really hard. And sometimes it's like you're changing your whole personality if you are very type A and you like to have plans and schedules and routines. But it's like adding more things to worry about and more stress. At least that's what I found.
I love that radical acceptance. And like, I don't know, my little secret is I kind of really liked being trapped under a nursing baby or a contact napping baby and just being like, I'm going to listen to my book, my audiobook. And like, I can't do that. I have to hold the baby. Kind of nice. Like as a very active person, it was really nice to just be like,
exactly.
I kind of miss having that excuse.
Exactly. This is like a very short temporary time for us. Like I know it feels so long, but like your children right now are older, right? You don't have any more contact naps happening. And like for you to sit down and just be like, I'm just going to listen to my book, you would really have to think about that and be like, is it worth it? Because I have this and this and this to do. And you know what I mean? Like there are things that we can enjoy in this season of life. Like it's hard and it might not be the things that you thought you would enjoy beforehand, especially if you have your bassinet, didn't know anything about co-sleeping. Now you're realizing, wait, contact naps are really magical and special. And I don't know why, but I just feel so complete when my baby's lying right here sleeping on me. Like, it's just magical. I don't know. I know that sounds corny, but true.
No, it's so true. And you know what? You said like back when your oldest was born, there wasn't anyone going to take your hand and walk you through bed sharing. And like, isn't it so wonderful now that there are people who can do that? I can do that. You can do that. There are other, responsive sleep coaches that can do that and really help them be a guide, be a mentor, be a safe space to explore that messiness and, what else you might be able to optimize to support more sustainable, better sleep for everyone. And I love that is becoming more accessible.
It is over the last few years. I mean, look at your podcast right now. The fact that we're having an episode on bed sharing and not even safety. Like we said, we were going to talk kind of like about comfort and stuff. That's a very specific niche thing. And that did not exist in 2018. So I'm very excited about where things are headed. And as I mentioned earlier, I really hope the United States can kind of follow the UK's lead. Yeah. We'll see how long that takes, but
making a face over here. I don't know about that, but I would love that to happen as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will put in the show notes, but tell folks where they can find your awesome work.
If you like being on social media, I'm mainly on Instagram. And then we have a really big community there where we sort of it's like a safe space and we commiserate because as we've discussed today, there are some parts about bed sharing that are really hard. And so it's nice to vent once in a while. And so find me there at Cosleepy. And I also have my blog, my website, and my guides. All that you can find that at cosleepy.com.
Awesome. Tiffany, thank you so much for talking to me today. I mean, we could really just keep going and going and going, but it's been such a treat to talk with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And we are going to record your podcast episode on my podcast next week.
I know. Excited. And so folks have to be very excited to look out for that as well.
Yep.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.